up on some of the themes that we've been hearing. And I think one of the things that I heard was, when people are trying to talk about where we are, and there's this maturing of international and cross-border, but there's also this idea of, trying to own the customer, trying to own the customer relationship, but also trying to meet them wherever they are and however they shop. And in some cases, that means that it's not an owned channel. It's a non-owned channel. It's a partner channel. So I'd say that's kind of a conversation that has really been going on over the last couple of GELFs. But we really did want to kind of expand the conversation beyond just potentially the cross-border e-commerce world and marketplaces to really kind of pull in retail partnerships, looking at all traditional wholesale partners and how leaders like I have on stage here are driving some of the transformation. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. This is kind of part one of an hour-long program. Jim's going to kind of come up in the second half, whole different group of speakers, and it's going to talk a little bit about how people are working with franchisees and distribution partners. But I wanted to welcome Barbara and Casey and Valerie, and I think what we're going to do is ask you guys just to do a quick introduction. We're going to start with Barbara, then we're going to go to Valerie, and then we're going to wrap up with Casey. But just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you guys are selling internationally, how you're selling internationally, and then we'll jump into the panel discussion.
Great. Sounds good. Thank you, Ken. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I'm Barbara Garces, Chief Digital Officer at Citizen Watch America. So our operating territories are the US, Canada, Mexico, and UK. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of Citizen Watch headquartered in Tokyo. So we sell around the world. You probably know one of our brands best, which is Citizen Watch. So our watches are powered by any light, not just solar light. So as I'm sitting here, my watch is being charged by the lights in this room. We also own a wonderful company called Bulova. Bulova was founded in 1875 here in New York City and has always been owned and operated in New York City. So it's an American brand and a fabulous brand. So we sell to countries, more than 60 countries around the world, and of course have a major presence here in the Americas, as well as in Europe and in Asia. And we have been mostly a wholesale-focused organization. We're a manufacturer, first and foremost. And so direct-to-consumer is new for us. So I joined the company about 6+ years ago. And I came in to lead our digital transformation strategy, but then also to build, for the first time, our direct-to-consumer e-commerce business. So if you think about it, that's pretty late in the game. If you think about all of the categories that have started in e-commerce and are further along in their journey. So it's been an interesting opportunity, but also the opportunity has been to work with our wholesale partners and their e-commerce businesses, as well as our thousands of independent retailers, our mom and pop brick and mortar partners, who we want to be able to take along for the ride so that we're growing all pieces of the business. So it's been an interesting challenge, and I'm here to excited to speak with you guys today with my fellow panelists.
Thank you, Barb. Valerie?
Awesome. Good morning. Valerie Descheret. I'm with American Eagle Outfitters. We have the American Eagle and the Aerie, and Aerie by our offline by Aerie brand. So we're sort of a lifestyle pair of lifestyle brands focused on the 15 to 25, 30-year-old customer. Of course, we started in North America and in the U.S., American Eagle. But in addition to our very mature North American business, we're present in pretty much every other region. So APAC with a focus on Hong Kong and Japan, Latin America with a focus on Mexico, the Middle East, where we're quite large, Israel, and then also India and some of the Southeast Asia countries. So we're very, very broad in terms of our reach. And also recently, we re-entered Europe just last year. So we've been international for, this seems like too much. We've been international for over 15 years. And for pretty much all of that time, we were very, very store focused, and we only did international via cross-border from our U.S. site. So all of our localized e-commerce businesses. Oh, okay, I'm getting told that this is better. All of our localized e-commerce businesses actually started near the beginning of COVID. So it's actually a relatively new business for us, although in some of those markets, we're already hitting 20% of the total business. So
Wow.
our customer wants it, which was good news. We actually started international, like I said, over 15 years ago, mostly via licensed partners. So now we are still a mix of licensed and owned and operated. These are very, very tight licensed partnerships. These are, we talk to them, multiple times a week. So it's not like licenses that I've worked with before, but that we still have that mix of owned and operated and licensed. Our biggest owned and operated market is Mexico. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, actually. And then in all of our, just to talk to your channel question, in all of our markets, again, we started with stores. In a lot of our international markets, we then moved into wholesale partnerships that now also have both stores and e-commerce. And then, like I said, during COVID, we opened localized e-commerce brand sites in those markets, and in some of them, and many of them, also marketplace, like digital marketplace partnerships across multiple types of business models, depending on who it is. So we're definitely a broad mix of approaches and countries.
Yeah, and so kind of to the framework, again, people don't start out at cross-border. Some of them start with the regional, and they go back to cross-border, and then they move into the marketplaces.
We've done it all.
We've done it all, and it's not always sequential, and it's lots of hybrids, and that's really what we want to talk about today. When I reached out to Casey, and Barbara and Valerie both spoke last year. Casey's new to the stage, so thank you, Casey. And it was funny, when we were first talking, I was kind of like, well, kind of what we heard last year was people had pulled back a little bit. They'd focused on their tier 1 markets, which are also often the English-speaking markets. Casey's like, not us. We're taking care of our customers, and we're treating everybody around the world the same way. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and, kind of what you guys are doing in the U.S. and outside the U.S.
Sure. Okay, I'm on. So hey guys, good morning, and glad to be here. It's actually not just my first time on stage, but my first time here, and I'm very excited because I want to glean all those good ideas from everyone that's here. So Casey Sharrett, I run the direct-to-consumer business for GoPro. That also includes our performance marketing teams, and we are very U.S.-centric. So basically, global is global. We have folks on the ground, but for the most part, we're based out of the U.S. GoPro, if you're not aware, is an amazing way for consumers to capture and share immersive and exciting content and inspire other people to do the same. Most people know us for our cameras, but we actually offer a full array of products and solutions, which include apps and editing software, and those are all pulled together by subscriptions, which is a little bit unique, I think, from my partners up here and adds some complexity to the business. But the subscription allows our consumers access to a lot of the editing, unlimited cloud storage, discounts, and then also, because we sell action cameras, it also gives you damaged camera replacement, which a lot of people take advantage of. But anyway, excited to be here. I've been with the company for just over 2.5 years, and we're actually a little bit newer at the D2C business than I think both of my partners up here are. The company had basically decided to go and focus more on direct-to-consumer just right before the pandemic. Good thing they did when they did, of course. But we certainly sell through retail. We have partners as well that we use in all major 3 markets. We do about $1 billion of business. And then, of course, direct-to-consumer. We'll probably talk in a minute how that shifted a little bit over the course of the past few years, but from a direct-to-consumer perspective, we're in about 60 countries, 10 languages. From a retail perspective, we're in tens of thousands of retailers, both specialty and then, kind of core retail as well. And then, of course, we have a lot of the partners that these guys have mentioned. And so, we're actively doing business. We have 4 distribution centers that service our 3 major markets. We have 4 sites that we use, but again, everything kind of is based back in the U.S. We're based in San Mateo, California. However, we are all a fully remote business, so I'm actually based here in the New York area. And yeah, glad to be here.
All right, well, thank you. So we had a great. It's like the best parts of this is when you guys aren't here, to be honest. It's when we're having the prep calls and things like that. And you know, we were like, you know, trying to boil the ocean really about all we could potential. But we kind of settled on alignment as something to talk about. And we wanted to talk about channel alignment, you know, aligning with customers, which is, you know, kind of a customer ownership, customer data topic. Marketing, we're going to talk about how do we align marketing as we're trying to make sure the D2C and the partner digital channels are aligned. And we're going to hopefully get around to some of the technology collaboration. So that's what we're hoping to tackle here in the next 17 minutes and 40 seconds. But Casey, let's come back to you because pricing is one thing that has been a real issue. And really not since we've, you know, just since the pandemic. It's something that we talked a lot about, especially when you've got resale partners that are trying to go through marketplaces. So let's tackle that pricing. And I know you guys had some interesting pricing dynamics that we discussed on the call.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, first of all, I'll just say, like, there is nothing about pricing that's easy. We have amazing people at GoPro who help us to manage currency conversion, to help us to understand how our markets respond to different types of promotions based on, you know, what kind of offers and things that are out there. As I mentioned before, we started direct to consumer and really put a lot of emphasis on that going into the pandemic. And of course, when you are dealing with supply chain constraints and you're dealing with people not, you know, visiting stores and going into stores, you have a lot of things that you can do and a lot of latitude that you can do in your direct to consumer channel. And your retail partners care a little bit less. Like, you know, we peeled back a little bit. And so for us, through the pandemic, like, you know, pricing was directed quite a bit by direct to consumer. However, as we emerged from the pandemic, and, you know, really trying to take the signals of where the customers are and where they were going, you know, we certainly saw that people were, you know, interested in going back to stores. And so no secret to anyone here, consideration is a very long process if you're a luxury brand or you're high ticket. So you've got consumers that are shopping a lot of channels. And so our focus has really always been, and certainly much more emphasized to be, focus on the consumer and keep that kind of your center. So we made an announcement earlier this year, and what we basically decided to do was figure out how can we lift all boats and kind of go back to being world-class at retail. So for us, that meant taking a foray and going back to our retail partners and working with them. We actually decided to take our camera pricing back to the levels that it was at 2019, so sort of peeling back some of the things that we had done, and again, with the emphasis of, you know, trying to build the entire business as a whole. So it's been a little bit of trial and error. I will tell you that, you know, testing for us and optimization for us has without a doubt been one of the keys of our success. But, you know, what we're doing is working. But I think direct to consumer, you know, certainly with the tech side, you're much more flexible. You can make a lot of changes and you can adapt a little bit more, you know, adeptly. I don't think it's as easy on the retail side. And
Right.
I think our partners, you know, what's important for us is that there is, and I think we're going to talk a lot about partnership, you know, throughout the next 14 minutes. But without a doubt, our retail partners and our distribution partners and even Amazon, you know, these are all really valuable relationships that we strive to work towards and keep and have, you know, goodwill. So there's a lot of change that we've made in the past 6 months, but I think we're really headed in a good direction.
Got it. And Barbara, I know we talked a little bit about some of the new products, and getting the pricing right in the different markets is again, to Casey's point, never easy. Tell us a little bit about you know, some of the pricing discoveries that you guys had. Sure.
So very similar to Casey, what you've experienced. We have the similar situation because we're so broadly distributed. We have to continuously evolve our pricing strategy, and the way that we work with our partners, minimum advertised price is something that we're continuously looking at. And in particular, because the world of online, as we all know, is so borderless, we have to be very conscious of how we're showing up outside of the US. So one of the things that we found more and more is that even though we continue to develop products specific to specific regions, given the sensibilities within that region, there is of course, the search component. And people are continuing to come to us more and more so now, finding product that is compelling that is not sold here in the US. And when we finally bring it in, the pricing adjustments have to be made, but then there's a consumer expectation that's already set. Well, the price exists here in Europe, and why is it different here? So it's something that we're needing to work on more and more, I would say more recently, especially as the consumer has become, as we all know, very, very, very savvy, given the pandemic and all of the focus in our channels digitally. So it's, I think, a continuing evolution and something that requires a lot of discipline and continued agility, because the space just continues to change so drastically.
So Valerie, tied to pricing, we got into the whole, it's really a P&L issue. So when we're looking at the margins and pricing and the impact, any thoughts on alignment from a P&L perspective, whether it's the channel alignment or marketing alignment? And yeah, you've got 12 minutes to answer that question.
I mean, I think we all have very similar, how do you align or not align pricing internationally? The cost structure is not the same. We've had a lot of discussions about this internally. Obviously where the US's pricing is what a lot of global customers will see, because they'll go in through that Instagram account, even though we have local Instagram accounts. And so we do get comments from our customers, and so we are always trying to educate the customer about, keep repeating that duties and taxes are included, so that they kind of understand that there's a reason why the pricing is higher. But then also we've done a lot of focus, which is very different from I think how we operate in the US, but we've focused a lot on how do we push margin, not so much pricing, not so much MSRP, but the end price after discounting, which for us is something that we do a lot. How do we push that price, that margin, to be as high as possible on a blended perspective across the different channels? So we actually have done a lot of testing, especially over the last year, around does the pricing need to be the same in stores versus online in all of our markets, and where are customers willing to not accept that being the same? So as an example, we find that clearance doesn't have to be quite as deeply discounted online as it is in stores. Also, because the shopping experience of clearance is so much better online. You can filter by your size, and it's clean and it's easy, as opposed to picking things up off the floor under a crazy rack. So we've actually done a lot of testing around that, and around communicating how much easier it is to shop, and more stock added to clearance when everything obviously gets transferred back from the store. So this is very tactical, but it's actually made a visible difference in our P&L. And then also, I think the other thing is we just don't have as much brand awareness internationally as we do in the US. So continuing to explain to customers and educate customers around the details of our product has made a big impact in terms of them also being more willing to pay at full price or at kind of early discounts, as opposed to waiting till we get to clearance, which is when we're starting to get closer to the US's discounted end price. So it's definitely a game that I think we're getting better at playing.
So before we go to international marketplace, any other comments on just what you guys are seeing from the P&L perspectives and some of the alignment between pricing? And I mean, the clearance one is great, and in the store you can hide that clearance item down the aisle. You can't do that online. So
no, but you can make it a better shopping experience, and legitimately make it worth, I guess, the not being quite so discounted. So it's worked.
I'd love to jump in. So I'm crazy passionate about P&Ls and the conversations for omni-channel businesses. And, so there's probably a blend. There's no two businesses that kind of think about P&Ls in the same way, right? There's maybe market P&Ls, there's going to be channel P&Ls. But I think, one of the real keys to the magic is making sure that you have a leadership team that's looking at the business in its entirety. Because if not, you are going to make decisions at some point that are not the right decisions for the business as a whole. And so, kind of some of my opening remarks and how we are looking at the business is really trying to say, how do we rise all boats? if you looked at, it's like, for example, shipping, right? And you talk about, customs and fees and all of the components that go into it. If you think about shipping as a profit center, well, you're going to make a different decision than if you think about it, from a customer perspective. If you think about how you spend and allocate your marketing dollars, whether it's your brand marketing or your performance marketing, again, you have so many different touch points that the consumer has, and there's not one single path. So you're going to make different decisions. I have seen some wild stuff in my past prior to GoPro, where we've done things like pulled an entire performance marketing budget out to reinvest in stores. So ask me later if you want to hear about some of these crazy experiments. But at the end of the day, some of those crazy things have happened because someone was looking at a specific P&L and maybe didn't understand, some pieces of the business. So, I think it's, P&Ls are useful and they're important and they help us to gauge success, right? But so are KPIs. And so I think it's probably beholden on everyone in the room to help to educate the folks that are around us and help them to understand that, some things, yes, they're numbers, they're important numbers on a page, but, there's so much in the business that is fluid, and it's really about, trying to use customer data to help and inform how you're doing the right things, for the brand. So anyway, I could go on.
Yeah, and to that, Casey and Valerie were kind enough to sit down during the 3:30 to 4 peer discussions, so we can dive into that. Again, one of the things we try to do in these opening panels is whet your appetite for more conversation later. And as far as whetting appetite, Barbara, I'm going to ask you really quickly. We talked a little bit about marketplaces, especially the 1P, 3P. Marketplace platforms have always been, kind of core to international expansion. But there's a love-hate experience with many marketplaces, especially that one that starts with the A. Tell us a little bit about what you guys have been doing.
That has definitely been a love-hate relationship. It's my personal love-hate relationship with Amazon has essentially they are a very important piece of our business, but they're so complex. And I think one of the things that we've been able to do to learn and to optimize with Amazon is that we really need a different strategy and a different assortment. So in and of itself, Amazon has its own strategy that is complementary to our retail, our wholesale, our own direct-to-consumer e-commerce. And it took us a while to get there, but I think, the struggle remains real, where people will start on Amazon, they'll find Amazon-exclusive models that we've offered to that channel, and they will find consumers searching nonstop on our digital flagships for more information, for validation, for price comparison. So one of the things that we've really had success with is creating those Amazon exclusive models, because it eliminates the friction with not just our owned channels, but also our other retail partners. So I think that's something that's been working well, but we want to make sure that we're presenting the brand in the right way, with the breadth of assortment, with quality products that represent who we are. So I think that's a nice, fine compromise in a lot of ways. But as we know, like Amazon they're really smart. And so we're revisiting that strategy constantly, just making sure we work very closely with them. They are a valued partner. And so we collaborate with them very frequently to make sure that we are optimizing that business. But it's hard.
Yeah, go for it.
I think that close partnership is so important, because we've definitely had, not specific necessarily to Amazon, but we've had some really good success in international marketplaces, particularly in Mexico, and then in the Middle East, actually. And then we've had some much, much slower growth scenarios in other regions. And I've just found that, one, you can't, I know you mentioned it at your beginning, Mark, I have never seen success just depending on the TP or the third party.
Right.
Like that has never worked for us. So you need somebody very knowledgeable who hopefully came from a TP or came from Amazon or came from Mercado Libre, or whatever your focus is, on your team leading that work. Yes, they can work with a 3P if necessary, like in China, but to have them internally is so important, and then also to have that direct contact with the marketplace. If you don't have that, if they're not going to give that to you because you're not big enough fish, like you may want to reconsider is sort of like what I've learned partly the hard way over the last few jobs.
And every market has their own Amazon, right? So in the US last year, 61% of searches started on Amazon. So, I mean, you have to absolutely, and not only take them under consideration, but also realize that they're influencing your customer. And, you know, there's some good data we have. They are partnerships that are necessary. But I think that's a great point, you know, having people with experience that are, you know, in those markets and understand the marketplaces and the dynamics is critical.
So as we're starting to wrap up, we've got a global marketing showcase later in this room right after break where we're going to kind of come back to some of the marketing topics that we're going to kick off right now. But I thought you made a great point about the challenges when you're working with international partners. It's the marketing teams internally sometimes that are the challenge. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are seeing as the challenges for marketing alignment, especially between brand, performance marketing, some of the other teams you're really relying on internationally.
Yeah, I think it sort of comes down to a couple of like key things. One, I mentioned earlier that, you know, our brand awareness is very different in certain markets versus the US, or even, you know, between international markets. They're markets we've been in for 15 years, brand awareness is very high. They can really leverage some of the US assets, and they can sort of leverage the US approach because they're kind of in the same place in terms of balancing customer acquisition versus engagement. They're kind of in the same place in terms of expected ROASs and you know, how it should show up in your P&L because, you know, again, the brand awareness is comparable. But then when you try to compare that to a market where your brand awareness is in single digits and it's not at all the same, like all of a sudden the content in all of your communication has to be different. The expectations around the financials of marketing have to be totally different. So I think that's one of the key differences. Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I think the other thing, obviously, is that our brand isn't necessarily attracting the exact same customer in every market. And so, like I said, in the US, we're very much 15 to 25. That is the majority of our customer base, even though a lot of us, you know, not 15 to 25, still do wear some American Eagle. But in other countries, in basically every other foreign country, our customer is on average 10 to 15 years older than that. So again, we can't necessarily just do what the US is doing, right? We can't necessarily just like pull their assets. Also, our assortments are going to be different, especially as the markets get, like as certain individual international markets get bigger, they need specific assortments. You want to give that to them so that they can really drive their business. But it just makes it brings a lot of complexity into how we do things and how we consider like what we're going to market and how and where.
Yeah, and I think what we heard over and over throughout the, you know, kind of prep calls was just this idea that, you know, don't think of channels. The channel is often connecting with a different customer. So if you are trying to meet that customer where they shop, you're meeting different customers in these different channels. Digital's a key part of all of that. And that's really what we want to talk about throughout the day. So maybe we'll just close with maybe one suggestion that you guys might have for the crowd. Barbara, I guess you're at the end there, so you're less likely to hit me with the mic when I spring the, you know, one takeaway question at the end. But yeah, just one thing based on some of the conversations that we've had that you'd kind of recommend the crowd take away.
I think you mentioned a key word earlier, Kent, and it's data.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we haven't necessarily delved on for this session, but looking at the data is so important, and because the data can change so quickly, I think Valerie, you had mentioned the consumer and the target consumer is so different internationally and by country, and we have to make sure that we're marketing and offering an assortment that speaks to them. So at the end of the day, it is about that consumer and leveraging the data, looking at the variances of the data that becomes so important. So I think maintaining a focus on that, even while we're trying to wade through, you know, operational opportunities and trying to really expand and scale business.
Yeah, and the data, you know, you can listen to the customer, but the data sometimes shows you more about the customer than they'll tell you. Casey?
All right, I'm going to go with, there's a lot of really smart people in this room. There's also a lot of really smart people sitting out at the tables out and all of the vendor partners. I would tell you that piece of advice for me is to leverage all the partners that you have, because I never have a conversation with a vendor partner or a retail partner or brand partner that I don't get something out of. And so use the opportunity that's in front of you today. I'm particularly excited about seeing what happens in the II space, and particularly with kind of language and localization. And I think that we're on the cusp of seeing some really amazing changes that for global businesses are going to be super meaningful. Back to the P&L conversations, like I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So I'm going to go with use your partners and tap into the people around you.
Absolutely.
Love those. I'm going to go back to your original point or like focus of this conversation, which was alignment. I think for international and for digital, whether it's international or not, to work really well, you have to make sure that there's a lot of internal alignment within your leadership team, within the different functions. I think a lot of companies would like to think they're much further along in their digital journey, particularly traditional companies that started differently would like to think they're a lot further along in their digital journey than they maybe are internally, or than maybe all of their internal functional stakeholders are. So I think that internal alignment, making sure it's there, poking to make sure that it really is there, and educating and communicating is extremely important.
Okay, we could go on forever, but that's what the day is for. So I want to thank you guys. Please, a round of applause as Jim brings his team up. So thanks again, guys.